Still with Pete Rush here, and what engaging conversation. If you paid attention to the first 30 plus minutes of this, you've learned a lot, at least from Pete's perspective, and how this wonderful world of college athletics is trying to find its way through. And you were involved in your earlier professional days in a very famous case with Northwestern running back Darnell Autry, and it was kind of, to me, and not knowing, only knowing a little, kind of still just an indication of where things were and how we continued, we being college athletics, to go down a road that eventually was going to hit a wall, and it did. But talk about that, rehash that case, but also just how the heck did we really get here, and not say who's to blame, but again, as we work through it, how do both sides become friends again and make this work?
Okay, so Darnell Autry. Darnell Autry was a tailback for Northwestern. Northwestern, like Indiana, had been dormant. Their fans wore paper bags over their heads. The students wore paper bags because they lost, I think, 29 consecutive NCAA games. So they suddenly get good. Now, the mantra for the NCAA for the last 60 years has been student athletes, and you're supposed to be a student first and an athlete second. Apparently, as I understand this, I'll do this for you, Alan. Lou Holtz used to say, you're a student first and an athlete second.
That's a visual, folks. If you're listening to our podcast, he held up two fingers for the first one and one for the second, and only in Pete Rush form. Go ahead.
All right. So in any event, student athlete, and that was the way they did it, and it was that there wasn't really any money in it. This was just done for the pennants and the homecomings, and then television came along. Well, what does that mean? Well, television started to televise this stuff, and it got pretty popular. So the money started coming in. So they had a rule in the NCAA back in Darnell's age that Darnell Autry, and this is like 96. And the rule was, we own NCAA in the rule book. We own every image of the players that there can be. Any image of the players is owned by the NCAA. So Darnell Autry was this tailback, and he was very good. And out of the blue, Northwestern arose, and he became on the cover of Sports Illustrated when there was one, the real deal. He's playing Penn State, and they beat Penn State. They beat Notre Dame. They beat a lot of people, and they beat everybody. So it was Cinderella's story, just like this year. And he was their Fernando Mendoza. So he was the guy. And so an associate came to me and said, would you sue the NCAA? And I said, well, yeah, if the right case came along. And she said, well, my brother's got a roommate that might have a claim. So I just said, sure, have him come down. And this is after they'd been to the Rose Bowl, and this guy was on the Sports Illustrated. I thought there was some kind of claim. She said, well, he's a theater major, and he can't do something because he's on the football team. I said, okay, bring him in. Well, it turns out it's Darnell Autry, and he was a theater major, and he'd been offered a part in a movie over the summer to be filmed in Italy with Stanley Tucci, an Omen remake. And he'd been offered this subsequent due to his exposure as the player that he was. It was being made by a guy named Bindley Western, who graduated from Northwestern, making the movie in Italy. So he couldn't do it. So the Northwestern appealed. They said no. And there's a rule in there that says, we own your image. And so they brought Darnell came in. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I said, oh, absolutely. So we filed a complaint based on a very simple proposition that Darnell Autry can't be a student, i.e. a theater major, because he's an athlete. In other words, if any other theater major anywhere would be able to take this part, have a starring role, and become Taylor Swift if they wanted to, but he didn't own his own image, and it wasn't even his image in a football. So it was really ridiculous. But the reason the NCAA had the rule is they wanted to control all the television rights and make sure that people weren't selling, pirate copies of games and things like that. So that's why the rules of it. So we sued, we won. They amended the rule, and they called it the Darnell Autry rule. He got to go. And it was a great story, and so it was fascinating. In any event, um, it was literally, I knew from looking at the NLI deals, National Letter of Intents,
Yeah.
that the student athletes between the grant and aid and the National Letter of Intent do not sign over their image.
Yeah.
And so you do not sign your image over. So the university, I mean, the NCAA didn't own it. They still don't own it.
Yeah.
The image is your own. And the same case, I had a similar case, but this was the first one, and we sued and we won, and he got to do the part, and they amended it. Then I had a second case, Jeremy Bloom, who was a famous mogul skier,
Yeah.
and I argued that he should be able to keep his ski dough because he didn't get it by being on the NCAA stage. So different than Darnell, he didn't get it by being on the NCAA stage. He made it on his own. And so my argument was, if Julia Roberts came back and played tennis at Tufts, do you think you could put your picture on the cover of an NCAA magazine? Not a chance. Not a
Yeah.
chance. Same thing with LeBron, tight end at Ohio State. Not a chance. You don't own their image. So in any event, that's where it came. But now that's where the rub came in as far as who owns the image and what do they own and what do they do. And again, it was all the media dollars. So the root of all evil, as they say, is money.
Yeah.
And the media is the money. And so that's what's created the problem. We now have a golden goose. And the question is, who owns the eggs? And
Yeah.
that's why we have the problems we have. And unfortunately, the eggs are getting more plentiful and more valuable. So now there's more money to fight about, which is what gets us into the predicaments that we are, and rightfully so. The performers, as I used to argue, you go to Broadway. Can you imagine a play where the actors don't get any money, or where they get some kind of controlled amount of money? No, it's insane. So yes, they are performers, and like Taylor Swift, they're very good.
Yeah.
So in other words, they have the talent, and I represented minimally Maurice Clarett. My argument was, hey, wait a minute. Mike Tyson is the 18-year-old world champion in heavyweight, and Maurice Clarett can't go to the NFL. That actually doesn't make any sense at all. If you're the best in the world as a lawyer, as a doctor, as a sportscaster, as a media personality, you should rocket to the top.
Yeah.
I don't care how old you are.
Yeah.
Alyssa Liu won the world championship at 13. You could be really young and be really good. So in any event, you got a situation in which it's finally been recognized that these players are generating golden eggs and they should participate in it. This is just an evolution of the industrial revolution. It goes from the plantations in the South through the workers in the industrial. The workers end up getting more and more and more rights, and finally they are. And I understand people don't want to call them employees, and that has legal implications. But the reality of it is, there's no doubt at these major institutions that their education is controlled. I've actually seen it firsthand. You have to be in the film room at this, and this is in March for football. You have to be in the film room at 6 a.m. You can only take classes from 10 to noon, and then you got to be back there. You're spending 7 or 8 hours a day every day on the sports, and it's generating a lot of money. So in any other context, I'm offering my labor and somebody's profiting from it. You would call that person an employer. Whether it be an independent contractor, you'd say, well, no, he's the employer and I'm the employee. So this gets us more to where that is. And ideally, again, you don't want the university bringing on 3,000 new employees. But if you have a collective bargaining agreement, nobody says that Aaron Rodgers is an employee of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks that. And not for a second do they think that, because he's not. So that's how you avoid it. But if you're going to house them and feed them and make them run out on a field in a uniform that you design and show up for press conferences and sing national anthems and collect money for it, you're an employer. You're an employer.
I didn't know you were a Swiftie, but now that I know that, I mean, I had to throw that in there. No, what makes you in the big picture of this? I know the market clears things and has the ability to do this over time. And yet we seem to be in chaos and stepping into more of chaos. What makes you optimistic? This is obviously it's a big part of it's a part of your business, but also you're a fan and somebody that watches this and consumes college sports. What makes you optimistic this is going to be worked out? And is this something that gets worked out incrementally over the next 3 to 5 years? What give us a crystal ball of what Pete Rush thinks on that.
Yeah, if I could tell you that, I'd quit my day job. I wouldn't be talking to you.
Okay, don't do that.
No, so don't no. The answer is yes. Why? Because we're a capitalistic society. So in other words, if there's a way to make more money, and there is, it will be pursued, because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So you have a situation in which private equity is now circling the sports world. Why? What? Because they like sports?
Yeah.
No. Because there's money to be made.
Yeah.
So once you have a situation in which there's money to be made, our system is based on the people who can figure out the best way to make the money. The Elon Musks, the Bill Gateses, those people win. And so it's in the school's self-interest. Now, the problem is they're all political animals. Their also problem is there's just massive inertia. But the reality of it is they have to do budgets every year. And somebody's like, we lost $50 million. I mean, there's a reckoning at some point, even in America. It's sort of like, whoa, wait a minute. And to me, it's an even more pressing problem for a state institution, a publicly funded university, which most of these are. You can't keep doing that. You can't just keep. I know the Louisiana legislature got involved with the coaches there, because I don't know what they're out to, Brian Kelly and who else, but it's in the tens of millions of dollars. Right. And when you have a state university committing those kinds of monies, now ideally the state's not backing it, but you have a situation in which the university may not have enough money to perform its mission. And I mean, you have to get back to basics and say, what is Indiana? What is Purdue? And the answer is they're supposed to educate the future of our world. Yeah. That's their real mission and their real job. And this is a sideshow entertainment, beer and circuses type of thing. And you can't, as they say, you can't let the tail wag the dog. The dog's got to keep wagging it. And that's what the Ivy League said. It said, hey, you know what? We're here to make presidents of the United States. Yeah. That's what we do. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to let these other guys go out and build these football factories. But we're the University of Chicago. We make the atomic bomb. We win world wars. We don't build football programs. So at some point you have that literally identity crisis at these universities, I think. And I do think we're closer than people think. I think it needs some communication. It needs the people to talk to each other. It needs, quite frankly, the conferences to talk to each other. And unfortunately, you have a situation in which there's a lot of generals. And when you have a lot of generals, it's hard to get kind of organization. But I think the need to circle the wagons is here. And I think it's a force. And it certainly ought to be done. And maybe you go out and you hire a firm, all the schools do, and say, what's the model for this? How would you do it? I don't think it's that hard. I think it's the NFL model. And I think you put all this stuff in a contract, and that's the simplest approach. And frankly, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
You mentioned Beer and Circus. Murray Sperber's book of 2002, a great read, and he, of course, he's a Purdue graduate IU professor that used to take on Bob Knight every now and then on CNN. But if you want to read an interesting book of looking at what the future of a lot of this was back then, and you lived it, Pete. But I think that book was written in 2002. Really good read and fun to read from that standpoint. All right, I have to ask you a little basketball because you watch it, and you watch one of your alma maters, Duke, beat Michigan. Purdue took it on the chin pretty good from Michigan last week. There's a lot of talent in the top 16 teams in the NCAA this year. And you're a follower of not only personalities in basketball, but does Purdue have a chance? Yes, it has a chance. I'll answer that rhetorically, but where do you see this? It's really going to be an interesting tournament this year, and Purdue, I think, is in the thick of it, but Michigan and Duke may be at the very top.
I agree. They may be. They have the best talent, but if Purdue plays defense the way it played defense on last Friday night,
yeah,
I can tell you I would not want to play them. I would not want to play them. There weren't many free shots there for anybody. Now, that may have been inspired. It may have been a home game, but you have a situation where you've got really good senior leadership and you've had them in the big moments. So I would never bet against them. Painter's shown that he's been able to put these teams together, and what happens in the season, it can go up and down. Yes, people have the talent. I was sure Duke was going to win last year. I never would have predicted Florida was going to win, and they did. So, you need to keep at it. But if they play defense like that, Indiana was exhausted. They were exhausted. If you do that to Michigan, I can tell you, when somebody guards you like that, it is very hard. It's easy to get discouraged. Now, can you keep the energy up? Can you keep the attitude up? Yeah, you can, and you only need 6 games. So you probably only need 4 games, actually, but maybe 5. If they can stay in the top 7 and get a 2 seed, get a good draw, honestly, yes, I would never count them out.
Isn't it a funny correlation? You knew that from your basketball days. There wasn't a 3-pointer when you played and when I played, but we thought there was. We liked it. We always were ABA fans because we always wanted to shoot that thing. But you think about that Michigan 9 for 14 from 3 against Purdue, and then what they were against Duke. Duke did a good job defensively as well. It comes down to making shots too, defend and being able to defend. And there have been times when Purdue has had to have been pretty good at that. It's going to be interesting, be a lot of fun to watch. And that, I guess, is the crux of this conversation, of which you've now signed up for an annual visit here, whether you like it or not. So, though we'll need to negotiate your hourly rate. But
that's right. I've got a union.
I know it's a profit game, but. It's going to be an interesting tournament, and there's going to be a lot of fun things to watch down the stretch. And that ultimately is why I think in the crux of what you're saying, there's so much interest in football, and also in keeping men's basketball, women's basketball, and the Caitlin Clark effect, all those things going, that the market will take care of a lot of this stuff if we can get some ground rules. I mean, is that if you're going to sum it all up, is that kind of where we are with a lot of this?
Yeah, and the hard part is for the universities to give up some control. They're used to just being the masters of their domain, and you see it with the athletic directors. It used to be the former All-American is your athletic director, and he or she's glad handing people, and it's sort of George King, and now he's got an MBA from Harvard. That's why we want him. So it is a matter of the universities ceding a little authority, and it's sort of antithetical to the boards of trustees who are old diehard Purdue people. You've got to let it. You got to send your kid off to college to let them grow, and that's, I think, where we are. You've got to turn it over to the pros.
Yeah. Interesting and well said. Pete, thanks so much for your time, and great stuff. And I think it will help. I think it'll help some of our readers and those that want to pay attention to this long enough and listen to what you have to say, that there is hope for all this. This is a turbulent time. We get all that, but you hope that at the end of the day, Ross-Ade Stadium will still be full, and there'll be interest with all that down the road. But Pete, thanks again, and we appreciate it so much.
Alan, thanks for having me.
Want to thank Pete for taking all the time to join us today. Really interesting show, and we appreciate him so much. Really enlightened us on a number of different topics. Also want to take a moment to recognize the passing of Rondale Moore, and the Purdue family really lost a remarkable athlete way too soon. And that, of course, in 2018, first-team All-American, and one of the great performances in Purdue football history against Ohio State. No one will ever forget that game. No one will ever forget Rondale. We're sorry so much for his passing. And we want to also finally thank our sponsors, XXX, On the Hill but on the Level, of Purdue tradition since 1929, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. Next week, Golden Black Live will feature an interview with David Hummels, a Purdue economist who has really done a deep dive into the finances of college athletics and kind of where all this is going. And I really look forward to sharing that. And we'll also be talking the senior day as next week. We'll be leading into senior day when Purdue takes on Wisconsin on Saturday, March 7th. And we'll put into perspective Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Fletcher Loyer. It's hard to believe that their days at Purdue are just about over in Mackey Arena, but we'll certainly pay homage to those guys as well. So have a great rest of your Friday or whenever you're watching this. And we thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Gold and Black Live.